Hey guys, what's going on? This is Travis P11, and today I'm bringing you something kind of fun. I'm just sitting there watching Walking Dead, some old episodes, anticipating the next season and catching a little bit of Z Nation, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what if there really was some sort of a zombie apocalypse or some sort of virus outbreak? How well would I fare in the area where I live? Because after watching Walking Dead, I really don't think I'd want to be in the Georgia area just because of all the trees and the humidity and the heat. And just, I don't know, it seems like there's just a lack of resources sometimes when I'm watching those episodes. So I'm taking this from a perspective of where I live. Now, this is just for fun, okay? I'm just sitting here going through this list, just kind of saying maybe something to think about in any kind of a situation where things get really bad and maybe you're isolated from other places or other people. Where would be a good place to be? All right, so where is the best place to be when the zombie apocalypse breaks out? By Travis P11. Nebraska. Oh, now before you start booing and call us a flyover state and so on, here's what you need to consider about where we live. Now, you can argue any of these points with me. These are not scientifically based. This is my own unexperienced, somewhat educated opinion, all right? Water. We sit on top of one of the largest freshwater aquifers in the world. If you don't have water, you can't live. Without water, you really, well, I guess you could maybe try to grow some crops, but yeah, water's pretty important. So around here we have lots of natural wells, springs, ways to get water that don't even require electricity. Fresh water, might I add. So water's not going to be a problem here in Nebraska. Now, granted, the east and western part of our states are vastly different from one another, but water's usually not that hard to find. Point number 2, flora and fauna. There's lots of stuff out there that if you educate yourself, you could eat. Now, granted, in the wintertime, it's going to be tough because it does get very dry out here. We get a lot of snowfall at times, depending on which part of the state you live in. But if you look around, you've got a constant supply of food that you could maybe dry out and store over the winter. Lots of edible plants, lots of wild plants that grow out here, fruits, vegetables, and so on. Fauna, we've got lots of nature, squirrels, rabbits, everything kind of running around all over the place. So there is a potential source for food, so you don't necessarily have to starve. Granted, you need to educate yourself a little bit on what you can eat and what you can't. But Nebraska, very green vegetated state. No pun intended. All right, agriculture. Now you're going to say, well, how are you going to grow ag if you don't have your ammonia, you don't have your seed and this and that? Well, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the fields, we've got the equipment, and before that, we had more traditional ways of doing the farming. So if need be, people could go back to those more traditional methods. You do have a lot of dryland farming out here where people are able to grow corn and soybeans and so on without irrigation. It is possible. You can grow things here. Gardens are great in the summertime in Nebraska. You could grow a pretty decent food supply. So agriculture is a big one. And it's also going to tie in with a little point that I'm going to make later on. But again, you can grow things here. If you have food, you can live. Okay, now, when you look at the basic needs of what's necessary to survive a zombie apocalypse, you've got your food, you've got your water, all right? Wide open spaces. You need to be able to see the zombie hordes coming at you. Really, no place seems to be flatter, well, maybe Arizona, sorry G-Webs, than Nebraska. We've got some very, very wide open spaces. If you go through central and western Nebraska, you got a grain elevator about every 20 miles, it seems like, on the highway. On top of that grain elevator, you can see infinite distances, okay? I mean, if it's clear out, you would very easily be able to thin out any approaching zombie horde if you had the right firearms for the job. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of feet up in the air, okay? So wide open space is easy to see what's coming at you. You can go to big, vast open fields and not have trouble defending yourself or seeing what's coming at you. And that's a big one. The eastern part of our state has a lot more trees and a lot more hills, also the northern part of our state, but there are areas where you could fairly easily protect yourself if you had a group of people and you knew what you were doing. Wide open spaces, very important. Firearm friendly, yes, we have guns in Nebraska. Lots and lots of guns and responsible people that know how to use them. This is one of those states where you're going to find plentiful firearms. Now, I was watching something on truthaboutguns.com. It was an article I read where Nebraska had an extraordinarily low number of background checks per capita compared to the other states in the central U.S. We don't require background checks for person-to-person sales. A lot of guys I know inherit their firearms from their dads and their grandparents because our firearms really haven't been banned other than just the federal bans that have gone through. So we are firearm friendly. There are guns here. You have food, you have water, you've got wide open spaces, and you've got the weapons to defend yourself. All right, trying to make some strong points for why you should maybe think about coming to Nebraska. Yes, guns are plentiful. Hunters. Not only do we have people that have guns, we have people that know how to use them. There are many, many sportsmen in this state that go out and hunt deer and turkey and duck and goose and pretty much anything that flies or crawls or runs. So hunters that are very well versed in firearms. So you would find bands of people, especially where I'm at in central Nebraska, where, hey, you could very easily get groups of people together and you could defend towns if you had to. Granted, you'd obviously need the ammo supplies, but it would be possible. Hunters are plentiful here. Friendly peeps. Nebraskans are overly friendly. In fact, people that I've run into from other places are a bit shocked with how friendly we are. Like, let's just say you moved in next door and you're from someplace else. You wouldn't be surprised if your neighbor, who, if they are Nebraskans, if they're maybe from Nebraska, they would just stop over with the casserole and introduce themselves. I'm serious. Nebraskans are like overly friendly. Like, people just walk up to you and start talking to you in Walmart and you don't even know who they are. I'm not kidding. If you've been in Nebraska, you've probably had this experience before. It's just how we are. I would like to think that, yes, you're going to be in a panic survival situation, but Nebraskans tend to think rationally about things. We are somewhat stubborn sometimes, but we think things through. Hey, just look at our Unicam government, right? But anyway, friendly peeps. So there you go. You're going to find people that would do anything for you, okay, in any kind of a situation. I guess it's just that kind of that small town feel that you get in every community in our state. Interstate 80. Now, according to World War Z, Interstate 80 became one of the first major feeding grounds during the zombie apocalypse because you had cars that had accidents and got all bunched up with one another, and then the zombie hordes just basically zoomed in on the victims in the cars, and it just turned into mass carnage. Yeah, but if you could clear I-80, you have a very nice, stable, safe road that you could transport people on quickly and supplies. I-80 was one of those things that was built to basically help protect the United States if it was necessary to run supplies from one side of the country to the next. So Interstate 80, you've got a good solid road that goes through the entire, all the way across the width of the state. All right, so something to think about, transportation. Can you get where you need to go? We also have fairly decently maintained roads, and there's a really good country road system too, where you can get to where you need to be. Granted, since we're an agricultural state, everything's divided up into squares and acres and so on. So very easy to find your way around. Okay, so Interstate 80, transportation. You can move when you need to. Horses, cattle, and ag. Yes, we have ranches and horses and cattle. And believe it or not, you could raise cattle. It would be hard, but you could raise them without the necessary medicine and vaccine. You could raise herds of cattle for food. You could raise them, keep the agricultural stream going. It would not be impossible. 100 years ago, we had farmers raising cattle in Nebraska, or whatever, 75 years ago, 100, whatever, okay? You can raise those things here easily. I mean, the climate it can be rough in the wintertime, and if it gets brutal, you can lose those animals, but it's not impossible to work with, okay? And horses for transportation. And again, like I said, ranches, we have the infrastructure to survive. Granted, you would just need people thinking rationally, able to defend themselves if they needed to. And finally, point number 10, something else to consider. Okay, it's cold here in the wintertime. You have to stay warm. We do have trees. Now, the western part of our state is fairly arid and dry, and you get a lot less vegetation in some parts. But we have trees everywhere. Okay, as you go east, you get more and more trees. Now that's going to be a finite resource when people are scavenging for it, but the wood is there. All right, you could use the wood to make shelter. You could use the wood to burn, obviously to cook your food, to stay warm in the wintertime. It would be brutal, but it is there. The supplies are there. All right, and of course, we could always fall back on what our relatives did 100 years ago. You could always burn cow patties when they dry out. Now I wouldn't recommend that, but it's another supply. How would you rather burn to death or burn a cow patty? Something to ponder. So anyway, just me having a little bit of fun here, just kind of chatting away. I'm kind of hyped up for the next season of Walking Dead to break out. So anyway, there you have it, guys. That's the last little part that I have. So if you were to try to get someplace in terms of the zombie apocalypse, where should you go? Nebraska. Yes, that is right. So again, got to hype up my own state. Say what you want about this video. Dislike it, like it, subscribe, whatever. I don't care. I'm just having a good time. Just something to kind of pass the time. All right. So anyway, take care. Have fun. Be safe as usual. Again, subscribe if you like my channel. It's Travis P11. You can also find me over on gunchannels.com with Ordinary Average Guy Gun Channel. And we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.